So I just gave you a paper on beauty. First question, and I'm sorry, I apologize. There are like 5 different things I'm hoping to do and talk about today, and I'm just going to be all over the place. But hopefully, we'll do what we do. We'll get done what we get done, and I'll try not to just railroad you. So there's something you want to talk about. But first thing, did I say anything on your papers? Did I change something? Did I edit something and you don't know why? Did I put on your paper, please ask me about this? Awesome. It was a tough question. It was tougher than I realized. And I've spent a lot of time this week. I read your papers, and now I'm reading the Tuesday students because we're a week behind you. So I got their papers on beauty yesterday. Right. So I'm reading them this week. And some of you really brought up some deep issues. One issue is, how can I judge something is beautiful? Is there an objective standard? I am not comfortable. This is my opinion. I'm not comfortable with just saying, oh, if you think it's beautiful to you. No, because people think crazy stuff is beautiful. There's got to be a standard. But many of you brought up the fact that God is the source of beauty. So anything that we judge as beautiful is in relation to God. But then on some of your papers, on a lot of yours, I wrote a little paragraph. I write an essay on the bottom of your papers for you. It's just me having a dialogue with you. It's not me saying you were lacking in some way and I wish you had said this. It's me. I can't sit down with each of you. I would love to just have like Starbucks with each of you and talk about beauty for an hour. That would be amazing. But I can't. I don't have enough time, and frankly, you're probably too busy, and maybe you wouldn't want to. So I respond to you, and I noticed that a lot of you mentioned this, that beauty is in relationship to God, but yet God does not give us a chart. Here are my standards of beauty. Do you know what I mean? It's still a nebulous. I can ask God for wisdom, but I don't know that he's going to give me if it follows these 10 parameters, therefore it is beautiful. I don't think it's going to be forthcoming from God for me. So it's a hard question. Matthias, what did you want to say?
Would you encourage it if we, and obviously I say we, but anybody who wants to go through Starbucks and discuss papers?
You know what? I should tell your parents this.
Not just with you, but with each other.
Oh yeah, no, you don't have to invite me. If it's boring to have the teacher, like, it's totally fine. I'm not offended. I got other things I can do. It's fine. No, but if we ever read something or do something and your parents are fine with that, I would so sit down somewhere and just have a deeper conversation, deeper than we can have together. That would be my dream afternoon. Yes.
So I was able to. So Kyle and I actually pondered beauty, a valid and accurate definition. We pondered it for about 3 hours in total.
I am so happy to hear that.
I think I came to a conclusion that beauty is anything that God loves and anything that glorifies God.
So then my next question, and I think I wrote this on somebody's paper that said something to that effect, maybe you, can a non-Christian artifact, okay, by non-Christian, I mean it is not produced by a Christian with God specifically in mind, okay? Can it have beauty? And I think that we know that it can. We looked at, I brought in the Anglo-Saxon, these things that I brought in before. I brought in for the junior high kids. It's beautiful. Not Christian, but beautiful. And so does that mean then that anytime we see a glimpse of beauty anywhere in anything made by men's hands, God is in it? Even if the artist doesn't know that God was working through him? If you understand what I mean? Yeah, Kyle.
So we can say, in contrast, it has God's aspects. Beauty is something that comes from God. He created beauty himself. So when in creating anything on earth, there's some matter of fact beauty.
Which merits.
So it's like, so Thomas Aquinas would say everything, we talked about, some of you, did we talk about this? Everything is good insofar as it exists. Existence is a good. This is good because it exists, although, you know what, it's too tall and skinny and it falls over and it doesn't keep my tea as hot as I want. But insofar as it exists, it is a good. And I think, Kyle, what you're saying is, so far as God creates it, it is beautiful, simply because of its relation to being created by God. Am I telling back what you mean? What, Rhett?
So, like, obviously, what you said about like God created, but God also created us, and we're image bearers of God, and so He's created us with like an eye for beauty. And so, not saying everything that we think is beautiful, because there's, like you said, a lot of crazy things that people say are beautiful. But especially like as Christians, we'll see like I said, because we're created by God, we kind of have that creativity in us of God, like part of, obviously not, you couldn't just
Mm-hmm.
make an elephant, like make a new animal, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Matthias, did you want to chime in?
Well, you showed the picture of the vase. Now, we all think it's beautiful, but do you think God would think it's beautiful? Because it's made for pagan things.
That's a really good question. I have an answer.
Wait, say that again, what was it?
She showed the picture of the vase. Could you show that again real quick?
It's a shoulder clasp.
Oh, the shoulder clasp.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's was this the thing I showed?
Yeah, no, we think that's beautiful, but does God think it's beautiful?
Well, what's it based on?
Well, does
Oh, is it?
does beauty reside in what something is made of? Gold, is gold intrinsically beautiful, or is gold beautiful because we assign great value to it? Do you see what I mean? It is shiny and pretty.
We don't necessarily
but-
assign great value to it. God has assigned great value to it.
Yes. I don't know.
So, I have something. We can never define what God's beauty is, which is why defining beauty is really hard. Because there is an objective beauty, but we can never see it.
That's depressing to me, though, Kyle. That doesn't, it may be true, but it doesn't make me happy. I want to be able to judge. And maybe that's where it says in the Bible, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask, because maybe wisdom is required in the judgment of beauty. We usually think of beauty as being sensual and aesthetic, and wisdom as being mental, but I don't think wisdom is necessarily just mental. And it applies to those things as well, if that makes sense. Go for it, Matthew.
Like kind of the opposite of what you said. I think humans have an idea of what beauty is because they're created in the image of God and have the same emotions and stuff as Him. But it's kind of distorted with sin. But I think things that humans would take pleasure in, God also generally takes pleasure in too, except not in a sinful way like humans.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Interesting. Go ahead, Karsten.
And what you were saying with, like, since God is the standard for beauty, we can really never truly know what beauty is unless we see God,
Mhm.
which is not possible.
So, so in other words, the perception of beauty is a spiritual pursuit for us. It's not necessarily an aesthetic pursuit. It's spiritual, but it also involves training our senses to be in tune with the things that we should love. So those of you who read Augustine's Confessions with me last year will remember Augustine was all about training our loves, right? To love the right things in the right way, to the right degree. And we don't, but we can get better at it here. Matthias?
I don't have a question.
Okay.
So, if
Yeah.
we say that beauty is in respect to God, isn't anything else that we call like they are pretty, they are handsome, they are? Is that also part of this, which is the beauty?
This is hard because the standards of human beauty aren't the same through time and in every place, are they? So a beautiful woman, I'm just going to throw that out there because usually Men, we usually admire strength and masculinity, but women, we usually admire what we call prettiness, beauty, right? But if you look over time in art from other other times and also other places in the world, what we consider beauty in a woman is not what they consider beauty. And does that mean we're right and they're wrong? They're right and we're wrong? Or is physical beauty are okay, this is a very lame thing to say, but are we all beautiful in some way because we are made in the image of God? Even
We just
people that
choose to value different things.
we consider ugly, that like a person we consider ugly, but when God sees them, of course, we know God doesn't look on the outer appearance, right? God sees the heart. Anyway, it turned out to be Jesse. Physical beauty is mathematical, so they can study like how far apart are your eyes, how, you know, where, and if you've learned to draw faces, you know, there's stats for how far down the face you should put the eyes or the mouth, you know, and the proportions that we tend to find beautiful. They do studies, you know, like psychologists hook electrodes up to your, you know, brain, whatever, and then show you pictures of faces, and almost across the board, faces that meet those proportion standards are more pleasing to us. So I don't know, the little parts in your brain that light up. I don't know how this works. You know, it means I'm happy. I like what I'm seeing. Light up when you see those proportions. So in that case, Jesse, there could be an objective standard, like things that meet a mathematical ratio standard are beautiful. We can't apply that to everything, I guess. Yeah, Ethan.
Because that's also subjective based on the time that we're in. If you also study anthropology and sociology, you also realize that over time things will change because
Mhm.
because society in itself will change based on the rise and fall of new nations, or just through like a revolution or like a
Mhm.
paradigm in
Mhm.
your in the world. So like when we have like the age of industrialization, or this time that we're in now, we have a certain outlook of how things are, for everything. And this idea we have of beauty is pretty subjective because, and also it's also based on culture because the beauty standard here is like skinnier, blah blah blah, skinnier women. But actually, if you study the culture in India, it's actually cultures in India over for like the last few hundred years, more women who are like more fat were considered more beautiful. See, it's about it's subjective, and it meant like, oh, this man or this woman, like, they eat well, they are
Yes.
wealthy.
Yes. Now, Peter Paul Rubens, I believe, is the artist known for drawing what we would consider fat women, but just a little tubby, you know, not not huge. But it always makes, you know, those of us that have a few pounds we would like to lose, always makes us feel good to look at Rubenesque women. It's like, oh, they were beautiful then. So over time and over place. So just a second, don't forget. But let me say this before I forget. Another something that has changed over time that also has a mathematical ratio sense is music. Certain intervals between notes are pleasing to us, but not, this has not always been so. And so if we listen to music of other cultures, or we study the Greeks, those of you who read the Republic, remember that Plato had a lot to say about music in his Republic and the kinds of tones, the kinds of intervals that were acceptable. If we listen to that, it sounds sometimes off to us. Like there's something wrong with that. It's not right or wrong. It's just our ears are accustomed to certain intervals, musical intervals, that in the past they used different ones. Okay, these, do you, or you just,
I wanted to ask real quickly, what was that shoulder clasp used for?
I don't know. I'm thinking, Matthias, I'm thinking I've got a cloak on and I pull it over and I'm putting it here to hold it closed. So where I would use a pin They put it there and stuck the pin through, and it holds so I don't just drop my cloak. Okay, we're going to go down you three, and then I want to say something, and then we're going to move on past beauty, I think, unfortunately. But Kyle.
So, is society a social construct?
Mm.
Yes.
Music and beauty, or is
Yes.
that a social
See,
construct?
I don't like that.
It is though, because I mean,
I think that it could be true, but there could also be something that is beauty and something that is not beauty. Okay, now what Kyle is saying though, okay, I'm going to walk very dangerous area here again, but we have an assumption in the modern world that all cultures are equal, that all cultural manifestations are equal. This is the outlook. So it's just the way they do it. It's the way they do it. But I would argue that Christian nations are better culturally than the Aztecs, who are, Mayans, Aztecs, massively, cutting out people's hearts at the top of the pyramid. No, that is bad, and it is wrong. I'm just going to say it. But we're just sort of like, oh, but people do it different ways and different times. So if culture is a social construct, does that necessarily mean that some of them aren't better than others? Some of them aren't more beautiful than others. This is not a very popular thing to say today because it is in our relativistic world. But I think it's true. I'm just going to say it because I think it's true. I may change my mind someday, but right now, it seems to me like some cultural constructs are of more value and are better and are more beautiful than others. And that's just the way it is. But as I see it right now, Jesse and then Rhett, and then we're gonna move on. You had your hand up earlier? I'm so sorry, Rhett. Yes, okay, I'll let you do too, Rhett. But let Rhett go first.
Yeah. So like what?
Okay.
I think that there is a standard for beauty, but there are different social interpretations of it. So like beauty isn't a social construct; it's just different interpretations of beauty.
Okay, and also jumping on the back of that, but I'll let you go, Rhett, in a minute. Does that mean God gives us a certain leeway? For example, so we often, I think non-Christians think this, God's laws, well, 10 Commandments, okay, that it's, religion and Christianity is just a list of rules of stuff you're not supposed to do. This is a popular conception of Christianity. I am going to throw out there, Christianity doesn't say, see this table, see this is life, this is the world, don't do it. Don't do it. Stay in this little corner here and obey. I think this is what God has done. Stay away from this corner. This is danger corner. You don't want to go to this corner. It ends badly. All the rest of it is yours to enjoy, but don't go here. It will destroy you. Stay out there. Yes, one thing in the garden. All the rest of it is yours. So in that case, Karsten, could we say that, we have options to what we celebrate as beautiful, but God says there is an ugly. Don't go there. It's destructive. Does that make sense to you guys? Like maybe it's like that. And so that would give us freedom, right? To express as different groups of people what we consider beautiful. All right, just a second. Rhett was going to go, and then I'm like, eventually I am going to have to cut us off. But
I was just gonna say, I think we've already touched on this just a little bit, but like, remember how we were talking about like the anatomical proportions of like a face? Just to mention, like, there could be someone like, especially like in Egyptian times when beauty was really wealth. And there could be like a serpent who had no money, that had the perfect face proportions, perfect hair, like perfect everything, but because somebody else had more money, even if like their eyes were like farther apart.
yes.
Like, if their face proportions were off, it was to them beauty was wealth.
That's good because we don't live in isolation from our environment, do we? We're not just isolated faces or bodies. We come in a package deal with our environment and our family and our quirks and our character. And it's very hard to separate people. I don't know if we should. That's what the women in magazines That's what women complain about. It's that you've objectified, you've separated my face or my body from everything that goes along to make me a human being. All right, Kyle, you're not gonna have the total last word because I want to read something, but go for it.
So then people with the zone thing of this is evil, that's okay.
Mhm.
So therefore, that people can and do go into that. This is ugly. That's ugly, and call that beautiful. And that's how we get to this point of something is objectively ugly, but someone's calling it beautiful.
Yeah. In the Old Testament, one of the prophets, I think it's Isaiah, but I'm not totally sure. Is woe to the people who call good evil and evil good. All right, and I think we can. Woe to the people who call beauty ugliness and ugliness beauty. They are out of touch with reality. And what do we call people out of touch with reality? We call them crazy. We call them insane. Insanity is out of touch with reality, right? I mean, I just say it that way, but okay. So here's what I want to do. I didn't bring this. You guys have heard this speech about this. This is my commonplace book. In the Middle Ages, people, it was, and even in the time of the founding fathers, like Jefferson, we have bits of his commonplace book. It's just a journal. It's not to be fancy. It can be a spiral notebook, be any sort of thing with pages, but I like little leather things. And I write down quotes from things that I read, awesome, that are interesting to me. And then in the back, I've made a little index. I need to catch my index up. But because the idea of a commonplace book isn't just a random selection of quotes, it is quotes that I can go to when I want to. Or can I not find it? Oh, here we go. Quotes on topics. So I have an index. And so it says philosophy. And then I gave it page numbers, and all my quotes relating to philosophy, I can look up on those pages. Love, and I've got quotes. Death, and I've got quotes. Just things, big issues. Do you know what? Beauty. Oh, I've got 3 in beauty. But the one I wanted to read on beauty was one I just came across this week. I am reading through one of the church fathers named Gregory of Nyssa. He lived in the 400s, 300, late 300s. Anyway, and I'm reading through a big volume of his writings. But listen to what he said. I just read this week, never read it before. As regards the inquiry into the nature of beauty, we see again that the man of half-grown intelligence, when he observes an object which is bathed in the glow of a seeming beauty, thinks that that object is in its essence beautiful, no matter what it is that so prepossesses him with the pleasure of the eye. He will not go deeper into the subject. But the other, whose mind's eye is clear, and who can inspect such appearances, will neglect those elements which are the material only upon which the form of beauty works. Here, Plato, they're the form of beauty. To him, they will be but the ladder by which he climbs to the prospect of that intellectual beauty. I see this thing, oh, it's so beautiful, but I'm going to look past the roundness and the smoothness and the shape because it's showing me something deeper about beauty. This is what Gregory is saying. In accordance with their share in which all other beauties get their existence and their name. This shows the absence in the soul's faculties of feeling of that exact training which would enable them to distinguish between true beauty and the reverse. Owing to this, men give up all search after true beauty. No one, in fact, is so mentally blind as not to understand that without telling. That is, that the God of the universe is the only absolute and primal and unrivaled beauty and goodness. This really struck me because this is very much what some of you said in your paragraph to me. If we want to know what beauty is, we have to start with God. We have to look to God, who isn't just the provider of beauty, he is beauty. Not like God is not true. God is truth. God is not God living, he's life. Whatever that means. I mean, I will ponder probably for eternity what that actually means. Okay, thank you. That was lovely. We might just zip through Bede today. I don't know that anybody's going to complain if we zip through Bede, but I wanted to do 2 big things. First of all, Pangerbon. What is the narrator's job? What does he do? This is his day job. He writes. He studies.
I didn't fully understand the meaning of the
Okay, let's read it.
It's just a-
Let's read it. We're gonna take time to do what we want to do, and if Bede gets Bede will live with it. Bede is actually dead, so he will not. Bede is not dead. Bede is living with God. So okay.
Or is he?
Oh, I believe he is. Okay, here we go. Oh, now first I'm going to set this up. I brought this. This is among the things that we don't have time for. This poem was just scribbled in some Irish monk's notebook. I told you this. This is a great book called How the Irish Saved Civilization. Here's some examples of other what we call glosses. People just write or marginal notes, marginalia. I love that word. Things that people write in the margins of their books. It's got a name. One scribe will complain of the back-breaking work of book copying. Oh, I'm so tired. While another of a sloppy fellow scribe. Somebody wrote this next to some sloppy guy's work. It is easy to spot Gabriel's work here. Burn. A third will grind his teeth about the difficulty of the tortured ancient Greek he is copying. Some guy wrote in it. There's an end to that, and 7 curses with it. You ever want to write that in your school book? Like, there's an end to that. But for the most part, they enjoy their work and find themselves engrossed in the stories they are copying. Beneath a description of the death of Hector on the plain of Troy, one scribe, completely absorbed in the words he is copying, has written most sincerely, I am greatly grieved at the above-mentioned death. He wrote that in his copy. Another, measuring the endurance of his beloved art against his own brief lifespan, concludes, sad it is, little party-colored white book, for a day will surely come when someone will say over your page, the hand that wrote this is no more. Perhaps the clearest picture we possess of what it was like to be a scribal scholar is contained in an Irish poem slipped into a 9th century manuscript, Pangerbon, which otherwise contained a Latin commentary on Virgil and a list of Greek paradigms, Greek case endings, plus this poem, because somebody got bored. Let's read it.
That's awesome. That's so
And by the way, Pangerbon means white panger. A panger is a fuller, someone who beats your clothes with a club because apparently that cleans them.
You beat it with your cat. All the
No, I don't feel like you should beat it with never beat your clothes with a cat.
It'll shred your clothes.
It will hurt the cat and the hair will be all over the thing. No, it doesn't make sense. Okay. I and Pangerbon my cat, 'tis a like task we are at. Hunting mice is his delight, hunting words. I sit all night. Better far than praise of men, 'tis to sit with book and pen. Panger bears me no ill will, he too plies his simple skill. 'Tis a merry task to see at our tasks how glad are we, when at home we sit and find entertainment to our mind. Oftentimes a mouse will stray in the hero Panger's way. Oftentimes my keen thought set takes a meaning in its net. 'Gainst the wall he sets his eye, full and fierce and sharp and sly. 'Gainst the wall of knowledge I all my little wisdom try. When a mouse starts from its den, oh, how glad is Panger then. Oh, what gladness do I prove when I solve the doubts I love. So in peace, our task we ply, Pangerbon, my cat, and I. In our arts we find our bliss. I have mine and he has his. Practice every day has made Panger perfect in his trade. I get wisdom day and night, turning darkness into light. So what is Pangerbon's day job? What is his job? What does he do? He catches mice. He's a hunter. What is the narrator's job? You said it, Simeon. What does he do? He writes. He's a scholar. He's a learner. Pangerbon catches mice. The author catches ideas and words. Does that make sense, Ethan?
Yeah.
It's
it does.
adorable. It's
It is very
adorable.
interesting.
And it speaks on beauty.
And it speaks on beauty because this is a beautiful life they have. Pangerbon's beauty is when a mouse comes and he does his thing. I hate it when my cat can actually jump up on the bird feeder and take a bird out. I know. We have a cedar tree and it sits under the cedar tree and watches. I'm like, oh, here we go again. And it just, not even running, just straight up in the air from the ground, boom, and bats a bird. But you know what? It's sad, and it's indicative of the world of death, and that's not beautiful. But for a cat, like this is well done. And I even say to the cat, I don't love that, but you're a good hunter. You're a good kitty. Good job. But you're a dirty, rotten murderer. But good job.
Our cat has killed like thousands of mice.
Yes, and you don't need to know any more about this, but I happen to love mice, so we won't follow that. I really, really love mice. They're really, really adorable. So I've just totally lost my train of thought. I have no idea where we're going with that, except that beauty means perhaps part of beauty is living, I don't say living up to your potential, doing what you were created to do. And this scholar feels he was created to learn. And Pangerbon was created to kill things, not originally, but now. So this is another example of poetry. We read The Dream of the Rood. We read a little bit of Bede's poetry last week, Caedmon's poem and the acrostic poem on Ethelberga. And we are working on a paper on poetry and prose. What I want to do, if you have your list or any ideas that you've jotted down, get it out. I know. So this is mine. It's not great, but I came up with some stuff that I don't think we talked about. So wherever you have your list, or find a new empty page in a notebook, in your reading guide, whatever, let's go through and let's just take the time we need to really think about this more, because it's I've given you a hard one. I'll admit it. I've given you a hard one. But I think that we can make some headway. Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to make 2 columns, poetry and prose. I know I'm going to trip over that cord eventually. We are writing which one communicates more effectively. That's the goal. That's the goal. Now, I want you to stop and think about something. And this probably has occurred to you last week, and if you spent some time thinking about it this week. There are 2 ways. Okay, say I love poetry. I'm on team poetry. Just a second. There are two ways to promote that. I can say good things, good characteristics of poetry that communicate, or I can tell you why prose is bad. Do you see? If I have 2 sides to an issue, I can either promote this one actively, or I can denigrate that one. And they both serve to promote this one. Does everybody understand what I mean? Like I can say good things about this or bad things about that, and they both say this is good. So if you can't think of something awesome to say about the one you want to choose, think of bad things to say about the other one. Do you see where I'm going with that? Both of those are okay. So in my list, the list that I've lost, the list that I made. So under prose, I'm going to get confused because I wrote them on the other sides. I've listed good things about prose, but I've also listed bad things about poetry. You follow? And on this side, my poetry side, I've listed good things about poetry, but bad things about prose. Sometimes they're mirror images of each other. This is what I've done here. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk about what I've done, but I want to open it up to you guys, first of all. Does anyone think of something really positive or negative you want to say about one of this? Matthew, lay it on me.
One of the big things about prose and why it's better and why it's more effective than poetry is everybody here, even Ethan, secretly thinks that prose is better than poetry.
Even
because
Ethan.
He is currently talking in prose right now. If he wanted to, if he really thinks that poetry is the most effective way of communicating, then why would he be talking in prose?
Okay, So I want you guys to write these things down. I want you to leave here armed with the things we're going to talk about here. So get a blank sheet of paper, write this down. We all normally communicate in prose. I am not speaking to you in meter, not intentionally. Happens accidentally sometimes. I am not weighing my words for their aesthetic value. I'm just trying to tell you the facts. We normally do that. Karsten.
Poetry is easier to memorize word for word, whereas prose is easier to remember thought for thought.
Okay, so we all know that poetry is easier than prose, right? Do we know this? If you've tried to memorize scripture, like long prose sections of scripture, it's harder. But if it's like a psalm or something, it seems to be easier. And then if you've tried to memorize something that rhymes and has meter, it's so much easier. So let's do a corollary, just a second. Let's do a corollary of that. Easier to memorize, therefore, easier to remember the content. However, now tell me the flip side. Say it again, Karsten.
Prose is easier to remember thought for thought.
Okay.
It's also easy to remember for content, but because it's being
communicated. Easy to follow thoughts in prose. And may I put another corollary over here? This is not a corollary to that, but it might be easy to be distracted by the rhythm and rhyme. Do you know what I mean by that? Like I'm focused, H-Y-M-E. I'm focused, I'm reading the poem, that especially, okay, Dr. Seuss is very elementary, so it's easy to not recognize both. But you get carried away. Oh, let's do The Raven, which isn't so easy. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, and I'm just so into it. I don't even know what he's talking about anymore because I'm just so into it. I'm distracted, perhaps. Well, oh, yes, I'm sorry. Rhythm and rhyme easily distracts. Thank you. If you see me putting something in the wrong side, please tell me. Kyle, you wanted to say something now. You had to.
When I was just thinking of this, and I thought about this for a while. When you're younger, you tend to like more poetry and understand poetry better and like the sound of the words. Versus when you're older and you want just information faster, right? I'm prose. Like it explains it, definition, boom, boom, boom.
Do you guys agree?
Whether that is based upon our community as right now, or based upon the time that we're in now, I feel like as we get older, we want more direct information, whereas we're younger, we want more of the sounding pretty and.
Wow. I think because it sticks with us more when we're younger.
Would you guys agree with that in general? That poetry appeals to the young? Alice, you're just sort of on the fence on that. You want to chime in? Do you think that's not necessarily true? Yeah, this is true. Well, okay, let's do this. Let's throw it out there. We don't have to accept it or use it. But what I'm thinking of, a favorite in my household was always Robert Louis Stevenson's Child's Garden of Verses, many of which we memorized, and I have them set to music. There's this awesome place called Child's Garden Songs, and they're in my car. Like, I listen to them driving around. I listen to My Shadow in bed in summer and stuff because they're pleasant. So, and maybe that's why they appeal. So possibly, okay. I can think of this is a double whammy. It's a pro poetry in the sense that appeals to children if you accept this premise, and these are those most in the process of learning. So in other words, we give poetry to the young, and what are the young? The young are the ones who are heavily learning. Therefore, poetry is great in the process of learning. However, on the flip side, this is one of those mirror image flip sides. Adults wishing to learn well, this is true, but usually use prose. Do you know what I mean? I mean choose books written in prose. I told you last week that wasn't always true. That Lucretius, the Roman Epicurean Lucretius, wrote a famous On the Nature of Things, like his philosophical treatise in poetry, because that was a thing. We write everything in poetry if we're Roman back then. Back then. So
This time, I think it's more.
that could be. Rhett, what you got?
So like, I think like prose with like the age difference, how you're talking about like how when we were younger, we like poetry more because it appeals to us more.
Hmm.
Like as you get older and your lifestyle changes, like
Hey, guys,
at this age,
listen to Rhett.
we start to like get a job and work, and we want to get stuff done efficiently
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. And whereas poetry, like with prose, you could just start writing and write, and you don't have to follow a common beat. Whereas with poetry, you have to like think about it.
Okay, poetry is laborious.
Like you get the same point across, you just have to try harder.
Okay, it's a more laborious. More laborious form of communication, and this is a more
Relaxed and lenient.
no, this isn't. Oh, you're right. They should be. Okay, but poetry more laborious to write. Prose, what do we want to say? Prose is more is easier, is more straight for the author. We're thinking of from the author's perspective. What do we want to say? Prose is, yeah, but so poetry is more laborious. That's why we should choose prose. Prose is what for the author? It is there anything negative?
No.
Okay, so prose easier to write.
And for the reader, prose is
easier to read as well. Understand. Yeah, I would argue.
Okay, easier to read.
Like with poetry,
Oh,
you have to think about, like if I have to think about a couple lines back to understand the sentence that you're reading.
so can we put a corollary under this? Poetry takes time. Poetry, I need to put that. Poetry takes time and effort for the reader. Do you see what I mean? I think, have I represented what you said? Yeah, Ethan.
I have a pro that can be worked with. It takes time forever for the reader. And the poetry in the right hands can reach its readers in a fuller understanding.
Okay, in what way is it fuller?
Like understanding the author. Like it could like with poetry you have to try and understand from the author's perspective more than prose. Because poetry is since it's meant to conceal or reveal facts, you have to gain an understanding of what the author means.
So the effort that poetry takes pays off for the reader in a deeper level of understanding. Okay, so the
emotion from the
effort,
Not emotion. You get
What?
the understanding.
but we get both. I think we can say both of those. So the effort to read poetry leads to deeper understanding. And what kind of understanding? Let's put two corollaries under it: intellectual understanding and emotional understanding, which prose can do too. But okay, so here's what I need to do. I need people to tell me when you've written this down because I'm running out of room, obviously, and I'm not a giant, and I'm not climbing on the chairs. No, it's fine. We would run out of space anyway. But I just want to make sure we have this, and then I will erase and we will do more. Okay, I see Dalton still writing. Is anybody else? Oh no, Emma and Sophie. I don't want to rush. Oh, Hannah, it's fine. We got Jesse.
Thing I want to say.
Say it.
That Ethan said for his point on poetry is he said that in the right hands, and I think more for the general public, prose is the better way of writing, because I do agree that if in the right hands, poetry could be more effective to understand and get the right emotion across. Like you can describe it easier, but
with prose, the general public, I know some people who can't even read. So,
But is that based
It-
on intellectual like that's
Yes.
like people's like
yeah.
So does that, so, okay, I'm not interrupting you, but I want to make sure I see where you're going. I'm saying it back to you so you can say, no, that's not what I mean, or yes. So the effort to read the poetry may lead to a deeper understanding, but it is also a hindrance and limits the audience because there are more people who may not be able to effectively understand the poetry. Is that an accurate description of what you're saying? Okay, can you hold on to that, Jesse? Don't forget that because I want to add that when we erase. All right? I would love to walk by and overhear a debate on this. Yeah, Rhett.
Um,
Oh, is there anybody still writing? Matthew, are you still writing this? Is everybody good with what I have on the board? Okay, all right. Talk, Rhett.
So you mentioned that children, but when you think about like the stages of reading slowly when you're learning to read, you start off with the books of like cat is fat. Yeah, fat. With something which is a prose. I know it rhymes, but it's just but very simple prose. But then once you start to learn a little bit more, you go to poetry. And so, like, the understanding, like, that kind of shows like, if you say there's like 4 stages of reading, like, understanding simple prose, and then understanding simple poetry, and then complex prose, and then the last one is complex poetry. And so, like, the prose, I wouldn't say it's as easy, or for the poetry, it's not as easy to understand as, like, you said that it's easy for children learning, but I would say that it's more like how Jesse was saying, how he doesn't even know some people that know how to read. Like, they would go to the first prose, then they might learn some, like, memorizing stuff, just how, like, the ABCs is a tune, and then the general public, I would say, is more at the third level where it's like a little bit more advanced prose, but they're not like advanced poetry and like
most people come to
So-
learn advanced poetry.
So here's what I get from Rhett and Jesse, that the effort of reading prose limits who can access it because it takes some specialized knowledge. Often, I think Pangerbon was pretty easy, but sometimes it really takes specialized knowledge to really appreciate poetry. On the other hand, the fact that poetry takes longer to appreciate and it's a higher level of training means we might infer from that poetry is a deeper form of communication that not just everybody can access, but it communicates to you more deeply because it requires more training to appreciate. But is that accurate?
Yeah, to get to like that deeper level, you have to have more knowledge. Otherwise, poetry is just like silly little poems, For like if all you know is like a little bit better prose and you haven't gotten to that advanced poetry, like deeper poetry doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything.
Yes.
Whereas like poetry, if all you can understand is poetry, like the cat is fat, like those simple, like then poetry, then of course prose is better.
Right. So I'm just going to put this in the middle because this is sort of the answer to this question may depend on who or what sort of person, and by that I mean, what level of education or understanding or ability is reading. This is not a pro one side or the other so much as an interesting idea that I'm not sure what to do with. Ethan, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yes. I disagree with that. Why? Because when you're learning poems or you're learning fable, just learning something as a kid, you're ultimately learning life lessons and stories and things like that. And as you go on to learning a little more, you can get more connection to poetry. Like Jack Sprat could eat no fat, and his wife could eat no lean, and together they licked the platter clean. That literally means
Got it.
to each their own. People are different. That's a simple concept for children to
Yes.
understand.
That
So no, just a second. Let him finish.
And as we go further in our studies, if you're not intellectually stimulating your mind, then you're not going to. Of course, you're not going to get a deeper understanding of poetry. I mean, you might if you have divine influence, but that we're not talking about divine influence. But as you progress, there will be poems for certain people. So saying that a poem's going to be too hard for somebody is incorrect because you're putting the wrong poem into the wrong person.
Okay.
Poem into the wrong person.
So this is a very good observation. Just a second. I promise you get your turn. It's a good, but does it go somewhere? Like, does what you say play for prose or poetry, or is it more? Is it more? Does it apply to this? It
I would say
depends.
it apply on the poetry side because it would say that it engages everyone at different levels.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Poetry.
There is a point at which you just can't understand something, and that's where you stop.
Yeah, and that's where it's open to.
Can be simple or complex, and therefore, just a second, Kyle, don't forget, but let me finish this. Poetry can be simple or complex, and therefore reaches all at various stages. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, do it, Kyle.
So, in saying that, I disagree with that statement there. In poetry,
I'm sorry, Hannah.
in prose, it is this. It is da 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 da. There isn't really levels of understanding you can take from that.
Is it?
Whereas prose, like he said,
Let Kyle have his say. We have to let Kyle have his say.
levels. So like what Ethan just said, they can't, the poetry he just said, he had to take meaning. He had to think that, not just words. He had to derive a meaning from that. And so
Who? The author or the reader?
the reader.
Okay.
The reader has to derive a meaning from the words, those 4 lines of poetry. They have to derive meaning. And some poetry, from that, when you have to derive more meaning. And you have to get different things that you derive. So it's like sort of this tree where you derive different things, whereas prose, I think, is more straightforward and they derive it for you. And so in saying that it's simple and not complex, or they have each different level, when you're trying to communicate clearly with the poetry, you can't give everyone the same copy. You have to dumb it down. And I believe prose is dumbing down poetry. So for the general public and for the people that don't understand, I believe that it's not available to everyone. You have to dumb it down sometimes. And dumbing it down might change it into prose.
You know, I'm going to throw something in here. C.S. Lewis said, I don't know if this is original with C.S. Lewis or he just said, and it quoted someone else. He said that poetry is fallen music and prose is fallen poetry. That they have fallen away. So before I see hands, I love hands. But let me make sure I'm accurately reflecting. Kyle, are you then promoting poetry because poetry is the level of deepest understanding? Is that what you're saying? And then prose. So okay, for example, not saying anything bad about my junior high kids, but you guys are going to read Beowulf next week. They read Beowulf the Warrior. I did not give them the poem. I gave them a retelling. We could argue dumbed down, not really, but do you know what I mean? It's a good copy. Some of you read it with me. But I didn't give them the full thing because maybe they're not ready for it. Does that mean then that the full thing is a glory that a retelling then has fallen away from? And if so, then are we promoting poetry? Okay, you answer me.
I think it's more on the side of prose because if we're trying to communicate effectively, like the question is communicate effectively, then it's prose.
So are you echoing this, that the effort of reading poetry limits those who can access it?
Yes.
Would that?
But also going on to the aspect of it's less complicated, so you communicate more effectively. Because the goal here is prose or poetry a more effective mode
let's put that as a less complicated. Let's put that as a corollary
Yeah.
of this. Okay, you guys are so patient, but I'm going to go. Rhett has been longest. We're going to go Rhett, Matthew, Karsten, Alex, and then Jesse. Because I know your hand was the last one I saw.
So, Ethan, were you saying that the same, like two different levels or like there's poetry for everybody's level? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I would say like for some of the general public, but there's once you get down to the level of poetry that they understand, it's pointless for them to be reading poetry. You know, so like it's not poetry. Well,
It no longer be
the
poetry.
level like the level of difficulty, if you know what I mean, of the poem.
So dumbing down the poem to the point where it's not a poem anymore.
Well, not
Or
it's
that,
still
that
a
it no
poem, it's
longer
just not
conveys the
as
information.
yeah,
they
it's
want.
not effective
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
That prose, they would just you can't.
Oh, I
You
understand.
can't
'Cause
convey.
That's a good. That's actually.
Oh, okay. So let me reiterate what I think Rhett just said. When poetry must be altered and retold, you have also taken away meaning. So prose makes it more accessible, but it is now less depth of meaning.
Right.
Is this
It's
true?
like the highest level of poetry that they could understand. There's really no point for them reading it because they can understand more complex thoughts through prose.
I hear that because prose, you can indent it down as much as you want, and you can still get the meaning from behind it. Like when we were, we had this, this example in our Rudder Companion book where we have these different levels of speech. We have the grand speech, the middle, and then we have the plain speech. So grand is like the eloquent tree. I mean, the elegant tree sat in the forest. Middle would be like the beautiful tree was in the forest, and then
that's prose.
and then the plain one is
There's tree.
There's tree.
tree.
See the tree?
It's all prose. It's all prose. It's prose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see what you're saying, and you can condense it as much as you can, depending on your reading.
Yeah.
Ms. Ferguson,
All right. Yes.
what I want to say would be irrelevant if we kept.
Okay. Go for it then, Jesse.
Okay, so what Ethan said earlier is there is poetry for every different level. And I think that the only way that would be possible is if the levels went infinitely lower. Because, like, there are a lot of people I know who aren't as good at comprehending because they don't, like, I'm just going to say, no, okay, get out of here. No, I know some people who it's harder for them to comprehend words because I guess actually in a way of mental illness, it's like either if they have like certain forms of dyslexia. I know not all dyslexia applies to this. I know all dyslexia is different, but they might not have been raised the same way. We have been raised with a logical background, which is that's part of classical education. We've been raised with a logical background, which means it's easier for us to comprehend it, because that's kind of what we've just grown up with. And a lot of other people with a public education have been grown up with a way that's just, this is the answer, just know it instead of here's how you get the answer.
So perhaps we need to slightly alter, or you can use whatever definition you want. Definition of, the question was, does it communicate more effectively? Communicate to whom? Do we mean the average person? Do we mean everyone? I'm not going to answer that question for you. You can interpret that, and you can use, like Jesse's argument that poetry being more difficult limits yet further those with access to it. Or you can say, people with what was once an average education, which is now a really good education, considered. Once it was considered an average education, now we consider it a really good education. They have access to it. And if you want to say, communicate to those people, I don't care which way you go. Hang on, Kyle, because Matthew and Karsten and Alex have been waiting forever. Matthew.
One of the things with like somebody said, I don't remember who it was, they said that young children can often understand poetry better than prose. And I kind of think that's not really true because if a kid is about to touch like a knife, if
Yeah.
a kid is about to touch a knife, what do you think is going to be more effective? Saying, "Don't touch that." Whoa, or off your finger will go.
I love it. I'm memorizing that poem today. No, I'm sorry.
Or they can just say really quick, "Don't touch that. You'll cut your finger off."
Yeah.
Which one do you think they're going to understand?
Which, okay, whoa, this is great. This is great. I agree with Matthew in two ways. So if I need to communicate immediately, I do not take the time to unveil my meaning in poetry. However, if I am teaching my children a life lesson that I want them to memorize and hold on to for the future, I very well may do "off your finger will go." Oh, don't be off my finger will go. And they're going to say this so many times in their heads that they're going to remember. So it depends on circumstances, right? In the moment, I need to communicate immediately. It just comes out. It's prose. But if I want to give a lifelong, remember this handy tip for life, I might put it in a poem. And this is why, okay, so it's kind of a poem, and we all learned it with, yeah, I mean, it's a song, but it's a poem. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. And why do we do L, M, N, O? Because it matches the meter. You know what I mean? And because we want them to memorize it. We don't need them to be alerted to the alphabet immediately. They're going to die or lose body parts if they don't learn the alphabet right now. But when we want them to long-term store it away, we do poetryfy it. But that's really good. Okay, just a second. Karsten has also just been waiting and waiting.
I feel like something that hasn't been cleared up that needs to be cleared up. Both poetry and prose can be simple or complex. Like, I feel like a lot of what's been going on is like, oh, prose is simpler to read. It's like, well, we are reading a book in science by Thomas Kuhn, and that's tough.
Is this book or The Cat in the Hat easier? Yeah, you know what I mean. So
But then
this is.
if you take it on the flip side, it's like the paper that, like, if I wrote the paper I wrote last week, could read that, or we could read what's a complicated poem.
We could read the Iliad. We could read
And
The Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Poem is going to be more complicated than my paper, and so they're both. It's like we're taking Kuhn and we're comparing it to The Cat in the Hat, and we're saying, oh well, poetry is simpler, or we could take difficult poetry, like some of the ancient poetry that we've been reading, and we're saying, oh well, poetry is so much more complicated than, like, if I tell you not to cut your finger off with a knife. It's like,
Can I give you a dirty little secret of writing persuasive essays? And it is we can sometimes define things the way we want to define them in order to support our position. Now, this sounds a little shifty. I realize that. Maybe it is a little shifty, but people do it, so we should be aware that people do this to us. And it's good when we don't equivocate, when we don't use words more than one sense. But Carson is simple. Well, what do we mean by simple? What do we mean by complex? And so if you really are trying to support a position, okay, I can't believe I'm telling kids this. You can make simple or complex sort of mean what you want it to mean in that context. This is why it's a dirty secret. But you should know the secret because people are doing it to you. When you read what other people say or write, they're doing it to you. And so perhaps if you do it to someone else, do it to me, and then you will be more aware of it. But Karsten, this is a valid point. Levels of simplicity or complexity are not being delineated here. That means you may use examples as you wish.
like, objectively, one form is not more complicated than another.
Objectively, no. It depends on, as we've been throwing Dr. Seuss under the bus because it is pretty easy, or nursery rhymes, Mother Goose, except I don't know what Mary's Little Lamb was doing, I mean, this is a complexity there that I don't want to go into, but on the surface, they're pretty easy. Okay, Alex, you have waited so
I
long.
have a question. So I don't know if they always touch on the topic of emotion being communicated.
They have
So,
not.
Um, this could support both of them because in prose, when someone's talking, you can tell by the emotion of the voice, or just by writing it down, you can probably tell what they're trying to tell. But it's not pretty easy to tell what their emotion is unless they use like adjectives to describe it.
Yes.
And so, but in poetry, you can feel like they can communicate the weight of a situation. Like, I mean, for quickness, it's the weight. So for the quickness of like a dire situation, prose would be better because then you can sense the urgency in their voice. And then, but if it's like you're sending a text message to someone, you can communicate the effect of your voice with the poem as well. I mean, you could try to unpack it a little bit, but it's like if it's like it's still like a poem, but it's like a little more faster. You'll still feel the effectiveness because you're describing how everything is with words.
Yes.
And so
This is another definition I didn't say in speaking or writing. Alex makes a very important point that inflection, the way our voice sounds, communicates. And so I, in my mind, when I asked this question, I was thinking of it being written and not delivered. However, poetry is made to be spoken. It's not really made. But can I say back what I think you're driving at?
Yeah.
That poetry has an emotional depth to it that sometimes prose is lacking. So it has emotional depth. And may I put, I'm reading into what you said now. I realize that, but see if you agree. Reaching someone's emotions not necessarily, can have a greater impact in communication. So if I want to, so okay, your, dire situation or Matthew's finger cutting. Part of the communication is, don't touch that.
Yep.
All right, it's not so much the prose form of it, it's the urgency in my voice. It's the yell, it's my raised volume level. Tells the child, they just stop and drop whatever it is they have. If they're running out in the street, you scream at them. You scream at them before they get hit by a car. And the scream, hopefully, just okay, something's happening in my world. I don't know, but mom is screaming. And so it's not necessarily the fact that it's in prose, it's the emotion. And so I'm going to put on here that poetry meant to be spoken, and therefore it, I'm sorry, I'm getting very messy, I'm sorry, therefore it can have the vocal inflection adding meaning. Yes.
In a sense, how you were saying you could be distracted by the rhyme and meter earlier. I feel like in a sense with prose, especially like if you're making a logical arguments or trying to make proofs or writing a paper, for that you can get distracted by emotion with poetry because oftentimes if you're using prose, you don't need emotion. You're just laying down facts, and emotion is going to ruin your paper.
I wouldn't say that it would ruin it. I would say like
Emotional.
Emotion. Well, you can make poems really emotional, or you can just make them really like trying to unpack and tell them what you mean to talk about. Because with prose, it's kind of a bit harder to like say what you mean because you have to start like getting like I forgot the word reasons and some other word points.
Arguments.
Or references. That's
Okay.
So you can get what you need, but with poetry, with not too much emotion, but with just enough, so you can convey what you're trying to say about the subject,
Mm-hmm.
and then probably move on to someone else.
Okay. All right. Here's what. Okay. So we're going to need, because I need to do a couple of other things before we go, but we're gonna. Ella, did I see you have your hand up? Did you want to say something? Awesome. That was exceedingly honest of you. Congratulations. So here's what we're gonna do. Okay, just a second. Just a second. We're gonna go Rhett, Jesse, Kyle, Ethan, and then I would like to close it down. I would like to mention if there's anything that didn't come up, let me, and to give you, and I need to tell you about the outline. I also need to run through our bead questions really fast so you know the answers. Also need to introduce Beowulf to you. So, and I got like 15 minutes. So fire away, Rhett. I know.
You said poetry reaches your emotion. Like when it reaches your emotions, you can have greater communication.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, but I don't know that that's all poetry. I feel like that only is true if it's something that you already have emotion about, like that you care about. Like with that, it's
Much.
like it only reaches your emotions if it's something that you like. If they describe to you why you should have emotion about it, and then it ties your emotions in that. But if it's
Okay.
something that you really don't care about,
Okay.
then you're not gonna be as tied to it with your emotions. But if they convince you that your emotions like need to be tied to it, and that works, or if you have had previous like emotions about that topic, those like that would be the only reason that it would.
So this is not doesn't really do your comment justice, but much poetry just leaves people cold. They don't feel an emotional connection to it because they don't already have a connection. Like if I'd never been around cats before, maybe Pangerbon is like, meh, what's a cat? I don't know. Apparently they kill mice. I don't know. Okay, Alex remembered something.
Yes. Didn't the Romans, like everyone who knew Latin and Greek speak in poetry back then?
No.
Really?
Oh, no, not everyone, but they sometimes did.
And that's just what we have written down.
No, that's just that thing's written down. Okay, Jesse, fire away.
So, in the end, I think it boils down to targeted audience.
Whoever your audience
Different age levels, different academic levels, and in the end, though, I would say that prose is only slightly better. And the reason I'm saying that, with the topic of communication, and the reason I'm saying that is because poetry is used for beauty and eloquence. Now, prose is used for bluntness and honesty, like it's used for beauty. So I would say that prose is something that can be used two different ways, while poetry is something used more often as beauty.
Okay, so I wrote poetry is often used for beauty and eloquence. Prose is generally straightforward, but can also have beauty. So prose has a double deal that maybe poetry doesn't. Sometimes poetry can be more obscure but beautiful. Prose can be more straightforward, but can also be beautiful.
Correct. I think poetry has the ability because poetry can say something beautiful and sound beautiful, whereas prose can not sound beautiful but say beautiful.
Okay, I'm not going to write that down, but does everybody see the different? Okay, Kyle.
So, question: if we have two of the same thing, speaking of the same thing, one's in poetry, one's in prose. So if we took Kuhn, made it poetry, would it be more complicated or less complicated? More. Okay.
Can I?
So
Here. Okay, sorry. Okay, I need to. Okay, I'm running out of room. Okay, just a second. This is why we write things down. Okay, so I'm going to throw out, because of time constraints, a few things I came up with. They may or may not play into your argument, but the Bible is mostly prose. When God communicated with us, it was largely in prose, with not as much poetry. The New Testament is almost exclusively prose, except for a few hymns thrown in, and the bulk of, the prophets, I don't know what to do there. Sometimes it's very poetic. You can take that or leave that. Okay, what else did I get? I wrote down that the heart or the intellect In the Middle Ages, they had an idea that, okay, we say things are intellectual, and that means we understand them with our mind. That's not what the medievals meant. The nous, the intellect, was a spiritual way of knowing. It's the way angels know. It's the way okay, I know that's a rectangle. I don't have to think about it. It's my nous. I just know. Without any intermediate. And the medieval said this is how angels know everything. They just know it. They don't have to learn it. I mean, technically, I did learn this once upon a time, but there's certain things we know. The whole is bigger than its parts. Whatever it is, the whole is going to be bigger than any individual part. You know it. You know it. I don't even have to teach you. You know it. And that's the intellect. And so I was arguing as I was brainstorming, poetry speaks to my intellect. It's like, oh, I know, I see. I don't go through the process of learning. I don't have to learn it. It's like a moment in a song, like you got a favorite song, and it's like that series of notes that just gives you goosebumps, or that line in a song that's just like, oh, that's the most awesome thing. And it just goes straight into you. And it doesn't run through your brain. This is why music is so dangerous, because sometimes it runs straight to your heart and it doesn't go through your brain and you don't analyze it. Poetry is an intuition of what is true. You can, use or not if you want. Just a second, Kyle. I put down poetry usually has fewer words to actual physically read. Oh, this is not always true because they're very long poems. A lot of what I wrote down, I wrote down most nonfiction is today communicated through prose. If people want to communicate something with you today, people don't write poems to communicate it. And then my counterpoint to the intellect was prose communicates to the mind, the seat of our reason, more capable than the heart of making judgments of truth and falsity, and hearts can be easily misled. So anyway, I don't expect you to write all that down. Okay, Kyle, one brief comment, and then we unfortunately really have to, oh my goodness.
Instead of 3 points about supporting poetry or prose, can I choose levels of intellect and then support each level with 3? And so like the high level of understanding, the mid and the low understanding, that like
I suppose I'm gonna give some leeway if you can make it fit into the outline. Yes, Dalton. Yeah.
It probably goes to prose based on the question you're asking. Because when you ask what's more efficient, maybe if you're asking which way is better communicating, then for most effective, it could go to poetry because of emotion. But I don't think emotion has much to do with efficient or
okay.
I think that's more time consuming. We know
and that's a definition problem, isn't it? What do we mean by effective? Or
I'd say more effective.
Okay. This is another example of you can kind of make it mean whatever you want to mean, which is a dangerous thing to say. Okay, Matthew.
For most audiences, you talk to them in prose. So prose is generally more effective.
Okay. And this is good. Okay. Everybody, turn to page 113. And there's an outline. Here's what I want you to do for next week. Okay, I'm keeping you guys a few minutes past, but I swear to you, I will talk as fast as I possibly can. What? Well, okay, I don't know what time you're supposed to leave, but okay, there is an outline on page 113. Next week, we will talk about the introduction and the conclusion. Please do not worry about that this week. I want you to concentrate on 2, 3, and 4. Some of you did a bunch of these with me last year. Some of you did them in the junior high class too. 2, 3, and 4. Here's what I need you to do. And we're not going to do the refutation this time. So forget 5, because we're going to probably be doing refuting throughout the 1, 2, 3, and 4. I need you to choose 3 big arguments in favor of one side or the other. Or Kyle, if you can somehow, 3 big arguments going in a general direction. What do I mean by big argument? This. Something that has subsidiaries. So, for example, poetry appeals to the heart or the intellect, they would say. Now, I could support that. I could say poetry is often emotionally moving. Poetry tells us things in a sort of metaphorical or figurative way that we don't really rationally assess. You see how I have things I can support that with? That idea that poetry appeals to the heart. And then I need to tell you maybe why that's a good thing. Here's an example of a small prose is concise and quicker to read. Oh, is that small or not?
That's kind of
I don't feel like I could do a lot. How could I support that? I mean, it's sort of, it's its own proof, but it could be a point in prose reaches more people volume-wise. Why? One reason is because it's more concise and faster to read. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, like that's not a big reason. The Bible is mostly prose. What are you going to say? Are you going to give me a list of the books of the Bible? But you could say a big reason would be the great authors choose prose. And then you could say, for example, Bede, our friend, has chosen prose, and God has largely. Although you could do it the other way. When God wants to reach us, he turns to poetry through the Psalms. So you could do both. But that's good, Karsten. The Bible is written in mostly prose. That's not really a big reason. That's a supporting reason. What we're looking for are three big supports. Prose is where it's at. Poetry is where it's at. And each of those, we want to find three reasons that bigger reason is true. You probably have it already written down on your paper. What you have to do is sift through, shuffle through your ideas. Bring your outline back next week. This is all I'm asking. Is like basically a big reason, three little reasons. Another big reasons, three supports. Another big reason, three supports. That's it. Most of your work is shuffling through what we've written down. Bring it so that A, I can see if you're on the right track. B, if you have any problem organizing the thoughts, we can organize it together. Does that instruction make sense to everybody? All right, so here's the deal. We do not, is anybody going to be heartbroken if I don't answer the bead questions? Okay, I feel like it's self-explanatory. If you have a burning desire to know more about bead and you couldn't find the answer to a question, email me and I will tell you. But I really want to give you a few minutes on Beowulf. Yes. We're not doing that because partly we will be refuting because we're, you know what I mean, in our text. Okay, for next week, bring me the outline, right? That's all you need to do, just an outline, don't write the paper. And we are going to read the lines 1 through 1590. This is a poem, and some of you may remember, it has line numbers. You know, like here's line 40, here's line 60. It's got line numbers so you can find your place. We're reading through line 1590, which is roughly half of it, okay? Here's what you need to know about Beowulf. Beowulf was a poem written by the Anglo-Saxons, the people that Bede is writing about, maybe in the time of Caedmon. We don't know. We think probably by the year 600. Somewhere in the 600s, somebody had written this poem. I know, lines 1 through 1590. I don't remember what page it's. You guys will see. You'll see the line numbers. You'll know, and it's a kind of a stopping place. We don't know who wrote it. It's a miracle we have it, because the only manuscript of Beowulf was kept in a library. Ask me about the Cotton Library next week. I'll tell you the longer story. It was kept in a library by a man whose descendants didn't want to deal with his library anymore, so they were donating all of the manuscripts. But they moved it to a place I kid you not, a place for safekeeping called Ashburnham House.
That's a great place to keep.
And you know the rest of the story. Ashburnham House caught on fire. I am. And the story is that the poor caretaker was throwing manuscripts out a window, but accidentally picked up some manuscripts with sparks on them, and then lit on fire his pile outside.
Are you serious?
I am. And so the manuscript, it was singed, but Beowulf was singed around the edges. Mr. Cotton had this awesome library. It was small by our standards, and it was organized. It was 14 shelves, and there was a bust of one of the Caesars on each shelf, and except for Cleopatra and one other lady, I can't remember. And so it was like it was named. All these books were named for the emperor, the shelf, and how many books. And if I remember right, Beowulf is Vitellius A15, and they still call it that. They still call that manuscript Vitellius A15. So sometimes you're reading and it's like, according to, Claudius B4. Like, what? It's the Cotton Library. So anyway, they saved Beowulf and it's singed, but they say it suffered more from lack of care after that. So, you have to take care of papyrus and parchment in a careful way. And so it's crumbling. It's crumbling. So every once in a while, you're going to be reading. Here's a good example. So there's the poem, and then suddenly there's just prose. Okay, there's an explanation. This is a part that's missing. And it will say, at this point, blah, blah, blah happens, as far as we know. I don't know, because the guys didn't take care of Vitellius A15, did they? And Ashburnham House caught on fire. So I will let you go. We will talk next week about some of the poetic devices. But hey, one more thing. You guys tell me, what makes this retelling of Beowulf, not in Anglo-Saxon, but in modern English, what makes it poetic? It doesn't rhyme. See if you can figure out. I was going to tell you, but hey, you figure it out for yourself. See if you can figure out what makes it poetic, what poetic devices they're using. And it's awesome. There involves death and eating people. So you'll love it.
Oh, it wasn't too bad. We talked. There's marrying your mother and killing your father is like literally all of grace.
Wait, wasn't that?
It really is.